In the early 15th century, nearly a century before Columbus would cross the Atlantic in his modest caravels, the largest fleet in human history dominated the Indian Ocean. These weren't European vessels seeking new worlds to conquer, but Chinese treasure ships of unimaginable scale, carrying diplomatic missions that would reshape the maritime world forever. The man who commanded this unprecedented naval force was Zheng He, a Muslim eunuch who rose to become China's greatest admiral. His 7 voyages between 1405 and 1433 would take Chinese power to the shores of Africa, decades before European exploration began, yet today, his name remains largely unknown to the Western world. What happened to this mighty fleet that once commanded respect from Southeast Asia to the Arabian Peninsula? How did the most advanced maritime civilization on Earth simply vanish from the seas? The answer lies in one of history's greatest acts of deliberate forgetting. Mystery written in the ashes of burned ships and destroyed records. The Yonglo Emperor, third ruler of the Ming dynasty, ascended to power in 1402 through civil war and bloodshed. Determined to legitimize his reign and project Chinese power across the known world, he conceived an ambitious plan that would dwarf all previous naval expeditions. His instrument of imperial will would be the treasure fleets of Zheng He. Construction began immediately in the shipyards of Nanjing, where thousands of craftsmen labored to build vessels of unprecedented size. The largest treasure ships stretched over 400 feet in length, dwarfing any European vessel of the era. Columbus's flagship, the Santa Maria, could have fit comfortably on the deck of these maritime giants, with room to spare. These ships carried more than just diplomatic missions. Their holds groaned under the weight of Chinese luxury goods, fine porcelain, silk textiles, lacquerware, and precious metals. The treasure fleets served as floating exhibitions of Chinese craftsmanship and wealth, designed to awe foreign rulers and demonstrate the superiority of Chinese civilization. The scale of construction was staggering. At peak production, the imperial shipyards employed over 20,000 workers, from master shipwrights to common laborers. The largest vessels required special dry docks carved into the riverbanks, while smaller support ships were built by the dozens to accompany each treasure ship on its oceanic voyage. Navigation technology aboard these vessels surpassed anything available in Europe. Chinese navigators used detailed star charts, magnetic compasses, and sophisticated depth-sounding techniques. They possessed maps showing sea routes, monsoon patterns, and harbor depths from Southeast Asia to the Arabian Peninsula, knowledge accumulated over centuries of maritime trade and exploration. The first treasure fleet departed in 1405 with 62 ships and nearly 28,000 men. Admiral Zheng He, standing over 6 feet tall and bearing the scars of his early capture and castration, commanded this floating city with absolute authority. His diverse crew includes sailors, soldiers, merchants, translators, doctors, and even astronomers to navigate by the stars. The fleet's first destinations included the spice-rich ports of Southeast Asia, where local rulers received Chinese envoys with ceremonies befitting imperial representatives. In Malacca, Palembang, and Colombo, treasure ships anchored in harbors that had never seen vessels of such magnificent proportions. Local populations gathered along shorelines, awed by these floating palaces. Trade flourished wherever the treasure fleets anchored. Chinese porcelain, silk, and manufactured goods were exchanged for exotic spices, precious woods, gems, and rare animals. However, these were not commercial ventures in the European sense. The Chinese engaged in tribute trade, where foreign rulers acknowledged Chinese supremacy in exchange for generous gifts and trading privileges. Each voyage pushed further into unknown waters. The third expedition reached the Malabar coast of India, while the fourth ventured into the Arabian Peninsula and Persian Gulf. By the fifth voyage, treasure ships were anchoring in the ports of East Africa, establishing Chinese presence along the Swahili coast, nearly 70 years before Vasco da Gama's arrival. The African expeditions brought giraffes, zebras, and rhinoceros back to China, exotic animals that amazed the imperial court and confirmed the treasure fleet's reach to the edges of the known world. Chinese coins and porcelain fragments found along the East African coast still testify to these remarkable voyages that connected China directly with African kingdoms. Not all voyages proceeded smoothly. The treasure fleets faced monsoons, pirates, and political upheavals in distant lands. Ships were lost to storms and reefs, while diplomatic missions sometimes encountered hostile reception from rulers who viewed Chinese power as a threat to their own authority. Yet Zheng He's leadership kept the expeditions focused on their imperial mandate. Evidence of Chinese presence can still be found today in Sri Lanka, where stone inscriptions record Zheng He's visits in Chinese, Tamil, and Persian. These trilingual monuments demonstrate the treasure fleet's sophisticated diplomatic approach, respecting local customs while asserting Chinese imperial authority. Similar traces exist throughout Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean region. When treasure ships returned to China, their holds filled with tributes from foreign lands. The Yonglo Emperor's court celebrated these demonstrations of Chinese supremacy. Exotic animals paraded through Beijing's streets, while foreign ambassadors kowtowed before the Dragon Throne. For 3 decades, China's maritime power seemed destined to dominate global trade routes indefinitely. Then everything changed. The Yonglo Emperor died in 1424, and his son, the Hongxi Emperor, inherited a realm strained by the enormous costs of maritime expeditions. Conservative Confucian officials, who had long opposed the treasure fleets as wasteful adventures, finally found their opportunity to influence imperial policy toward isolationism and continental defense. The 7th and final treasure fleet departed in 1433, but upon its return, the new emperor ordered the immediate cessation of all oceanic expeditions. In a stunning reversal of policy, China's magnificent navy was systematically dismantled. Ships were burned, records destroyed, and maritime technology abandoned. The greatest fleet in human history simply ceased to exist. The destruction was deliberate and thorough. Imperial officials burned ship designs, navigation charts, and expedition records. They wanted to erase not just the treasure fleets themselves, but any memory of China's maritime ambitions. Within a generation, the technical knowledge needed to build such vessels had been lost, buried beneath layers of official forgetting. By 1500, the shipyards that once produced 400-foot treasure ships lay abandoned and overgrown. China had voluntarily withdrawn from the seas, just as European explorers were beginning their own age of maritime expansion. The timing of this retreat would prove to be one of history's most consequential decisions, reshaping global power for centuries to come. Zheng He himself died around 1433, possibly during the final voyage that he commanded. The great admiral was buried far from home, his grave unmarked and location unknown. The man who had projected Chinese power across 3 continents became a footnote in official histories, his achievements deliberately obscured by successive generations of court historians. While China turned inward, European nations embraced oceanic exploration with dramatically different consequences. Portuguese caravels followed sea routes that Chinese treasure ships had pioneered decades earlier, while Spanish galleons conquered empires that might have acknowledged Chinese supremacy under different circumstances. The world's maritime balance shifted permanently westward, leaving China isolated behind increasingly rigid borders. Today, marine archaeologists continue searching for physical evidence of the treasure fleets. Scattered artifacts along Indian Ocean coasts provide tantalizing glimpses of these lost expeditions, but the ships themselves remain elusive. The deliberate destruction of records means that much about Zheng He's voyages may never be fully understood, leaving historians to piece together fragments of an extraordinary maritime legacy. The treasure fleets represent one of history's greatest what-ifs, a moment when Chinese maritime power could have reshaped global development along entirely different lines. Instead of European colonialism, the world might have witnessed Chinese diplomatic hegemony, trade-based rather than conquest-driven. In choosing isolation over exploration, China altered not just its own destiny, but the entire course of human civilization.